Ding dong, the Queen is dead, and the consulting detective Sherlock Holmes has a few very well-based theories. My dear Watsons, Queen Elizabeth I passed away peacefully at Richmond Palace in 1603 when she was 70. Or did she? Today we'll find out more about Queen Elizabeth's death and a little bit about her life. When I say Queen Elizabeth, I mean the one from the 16th century. Well, they both lived in the 16th... Okay, too soon. Anyway, my dear Watsons, stay tuned till the end of the video and we can together analyse all the prime suspects for the Queen's death. Elizabeth I was the first fully Protestant monarch in the history of England. Sorry, Edward VI, but you became a king as a 10-year-old and died at 16. Europe in the 16th century went through a series of religious wars and civil wars. England was no exception. Although there was no official civil war in the country, massive prosecutions and executions happened in the name of the faith. King Henry VIII started the show because he didn't like his queen anymore and wanted to divorce. The Pope didn't want to grant Henry the divorce or wanted too much money for it. Probably both. So Henry decided to become a Protestant and the head of the English Church. Soon, Henry VIII, as church leader, gave Henry VIII, as king, the much-wanted divorce. Soon, Henry learned about a much easier way to get rid of a wife: beheading. He used it twice. Nice guy. I wonder why there's no Henry IX for almost 600 years now. After his and Edward's death, there were only Mary and Elizabeth left in the Tudor dynasty, and Elizabeth's older sister and predecessor became the leader of a movement to restore Catholicism. She used some unusual ways to deal with Protestants, including burning at a stake, beheading, hanging, drowning, torture, cutting off noses, ears, limbs, and other pleasant things. I don't know why she was called Bloody Mary. What do you think, Watsons? Also, Mary imprisoned Elizabeth in a tower in the same cell where her mother, Anne Boleyn, waited for her execution. You know, the beheading that Henry VIII practiced on her wives? Yep, she was the wife. Luckily, Bloody Mary soon died. I wanted to say, unfortunately, Queen Mary Tudor soon died and Elizabeth became the new queen. She survived her sister's reign, although barely, and that was not the only attempt on her life. The Babington plot in 1586 was a plot to murder Elizabeth I in favour of her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots. Needless to say that it failed miserably. But there was one dead body after it. This plot was also used as a pretext for Mary's execution. Also, Philip II of Spain attacked England in 1588 with the Grand Armada, but also failed. He wanted to marry Elizabeth, even though he was her sister's widower. Actually, he wanted to restore Catholicism and annex England in the process. Elizabeth declined and said that she was married to England, and she stayed unmarried for all 45 years of her reign. But one attempt on her life left the most consequences on her health, self-confidence, and maybe on her death. And there was no suspect whatsoever. On the 10th of October 1562, Elizabeth caught smallpox. Most doctors gave her only a week to live, but she cheated death and was left with scars on her face to remind her of that occasion. Ironically, her caretaker, Lady Mary Sidney, looked like Two-Face from Batman after that period. Luckily, she didn't attack Gotham after her husband's words about the scars. Maybe that man's words about his wife could also be a reason why Elizabeth never married. Now that we know the history of her life, dear Watsons, let's say something about her habits and introduce some suspects. Elizabethan England had somewhat strange beauty ideals. To be beautiful, you need to have skin as pale and white as possible. Yeah, similar to typical English beauty today. I mean, just look at the royal family, or an average English football player. Not you, David Beckham, we love you. And yes, Harry, I am talking about you. Harry Kane, Prince Harry, whatever. Elizabeth was a woman of her time, precisely the queen of her time. So she used some products popular in the 16th century, but she was also a trendsetter, and some of the products were her inventions. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you with Tudor toothpaste. Pay 2, get 3. And if it feels a bit sweet, that's because it is. Elizabeth created a toothpaste made of sugar because she loved sweets. Quite an improvement, because before she brushed her teeth with honey. Yes, my dear Watsons, you heard me right. Some of her habits were not exactly healthy. This leads us to our first suspect. Most of the sources agree that Queen Elizabeth I died from blood poisoning. How that happened, one may ask. But we have more than one suspect when it comes to blood poisoning. Lead is the prime suspect because of fashion. As mentioned earlier, you need to have skin as pale as possible, and her scars from smallpox also didn't help. And the solution was obvious. Venetian ceruse. The Venetian ceruse was a cosmetic product for skin whitening. The best one on the market, containing only the best quality lead for the Queen's skin. Maybe she was born with it. Maybe it's lead. Sorry, wrong company. If she had read the small letters on the back, Queen Elizabeth I could have seen that it could cause lead poisoning, skin damage, and hair loss. So, Queen Elizabeth, skin damage? Check. Hair loss? Check. Lead poisoning? Probably. Death? Check. Unlucky for her, they didn't discover lead is poisonous for 30 more years after her death. If that wasn't enough, the Queen's red lipstick was made of cinnabar, which contains a lot of mercury. And who would guess mercury is poisonous? But don't worry, Queen Elizabeth used it only once a week, but on the other hand, she didn't remove it for a whole week. That must be good for the skin, right? But that's not all. For removing lipstick, the Queen used eggshells. And who would guess? Mercury! And symptoms of mercury poisoning may have to say something. Memory loss? Check. Irritability? Check. Depression? Check. And if we combine lead poisoning with mercury poisoning, maybe we have a winner. I mean the prime suspect. Or maybe it was a conspiracy. Let's call it a metal conspiracy. And if you smile and think that people back then were ignorant, scientists discovered that 43% of tested lipsticks today contain mercury. Have fun putting that on your lips. Next suspect, please. During the coronation ceremony in 1558, Elizabeth got the crown and the coronation ring. And she decided never to remove that ring as it had a special place in her heart. I'm reminding you that she ruled over England for 45 years. And she didn't remove it for a second. It doesn't come as a surprise. After all, we are talking about the lady who didn't remove her makeup for a week or so. At one point, it became impossible to remove the ring. Yes, the ring grew into flesh. And her doctors persuaded her to perform a simple procedure to remove the ring. 1 week later, Queen Elizabeth I was dead. Simple indeed. Maybe it was a coincidence, and maybe it wasn't. After the surgery, there is always a wound. Was it well protected? Once again, we're talking about the lady that put dangerous metals on her face to maintain beauty. Or the English standard of beauty, at least. Among less intriguing suspects, we can add infection of the tonsils because of some symptoms, cancer because of her very fast health decline, or pneumonia because of her weakened immunity. As a good detective, as I am, I must name all the suspects. But the first three are most likely to be the murderers. And they succeeded. Queen Elizabeth I passed away. After her death, she was put in a lead coffin and then placed in a wooden coffin. Someone might appreciate the irony that the number one suspect for her poisoning is also surrounding her for eternity since lead does not decompose. When you think about it, she is still sealed in lead, with her post-mortem makeup and everything. Don't imagine the smells if you want to eat today. Anyway, my dear Watsons, we can confirm that there wasn't any human killer responsible for the Queen's death. All of the above suspects are illnesses inflicted by the trends of that period, or illnesses that can't be affected. Even today, some of these are still killing millions. And that is all I discovered today. If you have any ideas, my dear Watsons, please tell me in the comments section. I don't know everything, and I don't think I am the best. And that's why I am the best.